caffeine, if you get up at around 1,000 mgs, it's like 10 cups of coffee, you can actually cause death due to a cardiovascular event. And you can buy bags of just like pure caffeine powder off Amazon.
Anybody could get off the couch, run a marathon today.
12 months, I followed 90% fat-based diet. We rewrote the textbooks on human nutrition because we were burning on average 1.5 grams of fat per minute. And up until that point, it was believed that the maximum amount of fat that a human body could burn was 1 gram of fat per minute.
Wow.
Now, my diet is not like that. Now what my diet looks like is...
Ben Greenfield, it is great to see you. I am sad that you're not in Austin right now, but we missed the mark last time you were here.
I don't know. I wish I could tell you I'm sad that I'm not in Austin, but I'm kind of happy to be home. I like my house.
Yeah, this is a good time of year to not be in Austin too. Summer is not when people usually come visit.
Oh, I mean, because it's hot?
Yep, exactly.
Oh man, yeah. Do you know there's like a lot of people will sleep on a chili pad or like a 8 sleep mattress or I use this one called a bed jet. It's like an air conditioning unit for your bed. But did you know there's actually a supplement, I think it falls under the category of an amino acid, that you can consume, and at about 5 grams it actually lowers your body's temperature. You'll find it in a lot of sleep supplements, but you can use it on a really hot day. It's called glycine.
Does it kill you if you take too much of it?
Anything kills you if you take too much of it. I mean, I think caffeine can cause enough like electrical fibrillation of the heart that if you get up at around 1,000 mgs in a serving, which, an average big cup of coffee is like 100 milligrams, like 10 cups of coffee, you can actually cause death due to a cardiovascular event. And you can buy bags of just like pure caffeine powder off Amazon that are north of 10,000 milligrams in a bag. So if I had to go, I think doing it on caffeine could be one relatively pleasant way to do it. You'd be fully alert.
Well, we've got other stimulants that fit in that category that may also be a fun way to go if we're taking stimulants here.
Yeah, if we're talking about how much of something could kill you, I don't know if glycine would be my pick. So
yeah.
I don't know. We're probably being really insensitive towards a select group of individuals right now. But yeah, if you're listening in, don't use high amounts of anything we mention on this show to induce death.
I use an 8 sleep, so I'm a fan. Do you use any such thing?
Well, yeah, I use that thing that I mentioned just a second ago, the bed jet, because it's like it's almost like a small air conditioning unit, but they designed it, as the name implies, to be niche to the bedroom. It's kind of like the chili pad and the 8 sleep, I think, have this function on them as well. You can adjust the temperature, so it could be kind of cold when you get into bed and then go colder and colder as you sleep and get into deeper sleep cycles, and then get warmer as the time arrives at which point you want to wake up. So this is like that, but instead of circulating cold water underneath the sheet, it's just air, and it kind of like blows it underneath the sheet, and it gets pretty cold. Like I can handle it at maybe 60% capacity, so keeps me cool. And I like the 8 sleep, but I'm one of those guys who likes to have as little electricity in the bedroom as possible. And I had a building biologist come through my house and kind of measure the EMF that was in different areas of the house. I think the bedroom is probably the most reasonable place to protect yourself from high amounts of electricity. And that bed jet really kicks out next to nothing. I mean, it's like, 5 feet away from my bed. And I think the 8 sleep, the last time I looked into it, you couldn't really disable the Wi-Fi on it during the night of sleep. And because, not only do I encourage a lot of my clients and, people who listen to me to unplug the Wi-Fi router at night, just so you're not getting bombarded with a signal during a night of sleep. I also think that it's a good idea to just have anything unplugged or Wi-Fi disabled in the bedroom that you can have disabled. And I don't even have Wi-Fi in my house. Like everything's hardwired. Like the computer I'm talking to you on right now, Brad, hardwired with Ethernet just to keep myself from having to have a bunch of radio frequencies and Wi-Fi bouncing around my office. So this is how I use my phone in my office. I just have an Ethernet cable, right? This is plugged into the router. This is I have the iPhone 15. So this is a Ethernet to USB-C adapter with a power option on it. So even my phone can be hardwired all day.
Wow. Well, none of that surprises me at all because it's Ben Greenfield talking here. Uh, and I have about 1,000 questions related to nerdy health shit that I know you're going to have answers to. But I want to lead up to that because for those that don't know you, you've been sort of in the biohacking space the entire time it's existed, quite honestly. Um, and you've written a shitload of books, some New York Times bestsellers. You've got Boundless 2.0, which is a biohacking guide coming out in 2025. But before that, you've been a pretty serious athlete from jump. Um, Tell me about your college tennis career and kind of the progression into more intense athleticism.
Yeah. By the way, nerdy health shit would be a good title for the next book. It's like the other NHS. Isn't National Health Services? Isn't that like the UK? I think.
I don't know.
Anyways, yeah. So I wasn't really into like sports or athletics much at all growing up. I was homeschooled K through 12 in North Idaho. So as you can imagine, just like a super kind of like crunchy Christian conservative homeschooled family where my athletic prowess was best displayed like with a violin bow or on the chessboard or in the library. I was pretty academic and intellectual, but not very athletic. I discovered tennis in high school and I was kind of off the bat just good at it. I don't know why. Like I'm good at just about anything that involves hitting or striking a ball over the net. Right. So I played middle for the men's volleyball team at Idaho. I wound up walking onto and playing on the college tennis team. I'm pretty decent at pickleball, even though I don't play much. I can drop into a pretty advanced game and do pretty well at pickleball. So I don't know. Maybe it's like my shoulders or the hand-eye thing or whatever. But tennis kind of took me down the path of weight training and explosiveness and powerlifting. And because I was studying exercise physiology and biomechanics at University of Idaho, I got into bodybuilding. Like I mentioned, I played volleyball, played middle for the men's water polo team. And then just total 180, dude. I was in Coeur d'Alene one year and the Ironman triathlon was happening. And I watched these people crossing the finish line of the Ironman. And I thought, gosh, I have to do that someday. That looks just badass. It's kind of like grass is always greener, right? Like an endurance athlete looks at a sprinter or a bodybuilder and they're like, dude, I would love to like kind of like bulk up someday. And I think a lot of the big bodybuilders will look at the endurance athletes and be like, man, I should try to run an ultra. That would be badass. So anyways, it kind of goes both ways, but I got into triathlon. I started doing sprint triathlons and Olympics, then half Ironman. And then I got an Ironman and did triathlon for like around 18 years. And that led to me writing my first book called Beyond Training because I was really healthy and fit on the outside and I looked good in spandex and I could ride a bike really fast. But I got into the early days of self-quantification and testing your blood and your biomarkers and realized that despite having relatively good aerobic fitness, like I had rampant levels of inflammation, dysregulated thyroid, low testosterone, joint issues, like a lot of problems that tend to arise when you're kind of running from a line in your exercise program for multiple hours, almost every day of the week, which I don't think is necessarily healthy. But the other problem is that, you probably know this, Brad, because I know you've done some endurance sports, is it's just swimming and biking and running, and that's it. Maybe a little bit of core work over and over and over again. So I was also pretty weak by the time I was like 35 years old. Like I could swim and bike and run pretty well. I competed in Ironman World Championships 6 times. What happened was I saw a Spartan race on TV. You're probably seeing a pattern here. And I thought, that looks pretty cool. I would like to try.
It's not a normal pattern, by the way.
I would like to try one of those. So I signed up for a Spartan race and I thought I was just going to crush because I could, I had an engine that could just go for days. And I remember I was like 3 miles into the race and the women start 5 minutes behind the men. And the lead female just like, then this was during, I think, the bucket carry with the big thing of gravel. And the lead female just cruises by me. And I'm trying to get this bucket of gravel up a hill. I couldn't climb a rope to save my life, barely had the hip mobility to get underneath the barbed wire. And, hauling a sandbag up a hill just destroyed me. After that, I realized I thought I was fit, but I'm not really like full body Batman fit. I can just, be hunched over on a bike riding for a really long time or staring at the line at the bottom of the pool. So,
well, let me pull back a little bit because that path covered 1,000 different things, and tennis to Ironman, I can see the allure. I can see the weightlifting moving into endurance and kind of the gap because it's so different. And I also grew up playing tennis and started weightlifting when I was probably 18, strength training. And I got introduced to endurance, and there was something about it that was just different. And I didn't think that I would have any attraction to it. Like, I liked the explosive nature, the adrenaline that came from, quick bursts. And endurance just seemed fucking long and boring. It turns out somehow there's like some mental thing in there that's really exciting or interesting. What do you like about endurance in particular?
Well, yeah, I mean, even obstacle course racing, like I was talking about, that could fall into the category of endurance because it is a lot of chronic repetitive motion, especially if you were to compare it to something like baseball or football or powerlifting or something like that. Like a lot of those races you're going, I mean, I did one that was 3 days long, right? So there's still a great deal of endurance and stamina and perseverance involved. And when you look at those character traits and you look at the average kind of like hard charging, high achieving entrepreneur, there's a lot of stick to itiveness that is required for being an entrepreneur, for building your own business, for taking those risks, for being able to roll up your sleeves and, moonlight, in many cases, sleep under your desk, put a lot of, I've experienced that many times in my life, just basically having to focus for extremely long periods of time and put in a lot of work and kind of pass the marshmallow test, so to speak, of trading off short-term pleasure for long-term gain. And that is endurance sports. So it is also interesting because if you look even into genetic pathways, there's certain genetic pathways that you can test, like how long dopamine hangs around in between neurons. It's called your COMT pathway, or the amount of rumination that you might be hardwired to have, which is more of a serotonin pathway. You can actually see direct correlation between the type of mental, whether you want to call it stubbornness, perseverance, stick-to-itiveness, determination, grit that someone has, and how they're hardwired from a neurotransmitter standpoint to have that, and the type of sports that they're attracted to or good at. And so when you look at the stereotype of, I don't know, the executive entrepreneurial type who was maybe a cross-country runner in high school and now does Ironman triathlons and also is very good and successful at running a business and having the focus and the determination and the organization to be able to do so. And you could compare and contrast that with like kind of like the, I don't know, this is going to piss off a lot of people, but like the hot-headed football player who is now whatever, working construction or, or engaged in more of what might be considered like a blue collar job. Like there is a little bit of hard wiring. And I realize I'm totally stereotyping, but there's something about endurance sports, triathlon, marathoning, swimming, cycling, etc., and the type of psyche that involves, and a crossover between that and being really good at focusing for long enough periods of time to be able to build a business.
Do you think that that's causal, or, I mean, there certainly seems to be a correlation.
I think it could go both ways, right? I think that, some people will develop a lot of those character traits through building businesses, through failure, through trial and error, and that will give them the mental fortitude that allows them to do something like, bite off and chew an Ironman triathlon. And then I also think that certain people are able to stick to certain things for long periods of time, discovered that early in life, got good at endurance sports as a result, and also have developed entrepreneurial or business building capabilities because of those character traits. So I think it could go both ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done a fair amount of rock climbing in my life, and there is an odd amount, depending on who you talk to, of engineers in rock climbing. And there's a community that refer to themselves as dirt bags, rock climbing, because they are basically living in their backpack, which is a bag full of dirt if you're climbing all the time. But there's this engineering mind that is problem solving focused. And rock climbing is very much a problem solving activity of figuring out how to balance, how to position, where to grab, etc.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, if you look at triathlon, to be successful at something like triathlon, you're sitting down and mapping out a week of precisely coordinated and scheduled swimming sessions, cycling sessions, running sessions, core training sessions, everything you're going to do leading up to the race, as far as what's called the periodized approach to when you're focusing on endurance versus power versus speed, et cetera. There's a massive level of organization required to be good at that sport. And those same skills, of course, have some pretty good transfer over into business success.
So you bring up an interesting point, because I have a general belief that basically anybody could get off the couch and run a marathon today. It's just a question of how long it's going to take them and how much it's going to suck afterwards.
Run, slow dance, slow walk. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And honestly, I think the same thing about Ironman. A lot of people are like, oh, they did 50 Ironman triathlons in 50 days. And I say, well, that requires a lot of grit and determination and perseverance. But if you look at the speed at which those Ironman triathlons are being completed, or even just one, it's kind of like pointing your body in one direction and going for really long periods of time, and provided enough food and energy gels and water and whatever else you're using to get you through that, it can be done. Like doing an Ironman in 17 hours or a marathon in the allotted, maximum, 6 hours. It's hard, like mentally, but it's not like a huge athletic feat. It's way more impressive for me to see someone who can run a mile in 4 minutes or less than somebody who can do like 50 16-hour Ironmans.
Yeah, well, because you've been there. But what I wanted to ask you was, I look at endurance activities as having three critical components. One is mindset, the other is training, and the third is nutrition. And I happen to be terrible at the nutrition element. What do you think the most important part of endurance is?
Oh, man. I mean, it's difficult to say, because it's gonna vary from person to person. Right, like for a complete athletic specimen with good genetics, for them it might be mindset, or managing the so-called attrition component. Right, like just your body pooping out because you don't have the right nutrition. For somebody who's got an iron gut and can just I've had friends who they'll do an Ironman on hamburger and French fries and a pizza. For them, it might be a little bit more of the training component because they're slow. But the thing about nutrition is interesting, because it is a big struggle for a lot of people who want to do a marathon, a cycling century, a triathlon, or whatever. And I went for the longest time pretty much swallowing hook, line, and sinker what folks like the Gatorade Sports Science Institute would preach about nutrition and carbohydrate, fat, and protein ratios. And even what I learned, I have a master's degree in physiology with an emphasis in human nutrition. And I was taught pretty much what I believed up to maybe like 10 years ago, which is high intake of breads and grains and whole grains and fruits, and, 55 to 65% carbohydrate intake. Often, if you're going to race in an event, getting up to like 80 to 90% carb intake leading up to the day of the race. And, pretty much kind of old school food pyramid type of stuff. And then I remember I got an invite. This was probably about 10 years ago, to participate in a study. And it's actually now a pretty famous study. It's called the FASTER study. It took place at University of Connecticut. And what they had one group of endurance athletes do is eat a high-fat diet. And even if you're not an endurance athlete, this is going to be interesting information for you as far as like how to burn fat. So they had one group follow a really high-fat diet. And by high-fat, I mean what would almost be termed a therapeutic ketogenic diet, right? So a ketogenic diet, restriction of carbohydrates and introduction of a higher amount of fats is something that has variance as far as the levels of it, meaning you could kind of sort of be in a state of ketosis, generating these ketones, which are a great preferred fuel for the heart, for the diaphragm, for the brain, for the liver. You could eat like maybe 30% carbohydrates of your total dietary intake. And if you're pretty active, you could still kind of sort of call that ketosis. Technically, it's a little bit more low carb, but you could call it ketosis. For managing things like Alzheimer's, dementia, post-TBI, concussion, seizures, epilepsy, things like that, there's some evidence that from a medical management scenario, eating a low-carb, high-fat diet can have some pretty good effects. So for this study, what they wanted to do was see, well, what if we take that super duper duper low-carb, high-fat approach and apply it to endurance sports with the hypothesis that in aerobic endurance sports, you're going for long periods of time at a low intensity, and the body burns more fat as a fuel at those lower intensities anyways. So why not feed it with more fat instead of more carbohydrates? And so for 12 months, I followed 90% fat-based diet, meaning it was all like heavy cream and butter and cheese and olive oil and avocados and olives. And, you know, you'd walk past an Italian restaurant and just go crazy because you couldn't eat a thing on the menu. And this was for 12 months because what they wanted to do was something that no study had ever done before. They wanted to see if it was possible, if a human being actually cut out a whole bunch of carbohydrates from their diet, if they could shift their body into becoming more of a fat burning machine. And furthermore, if you did that, if it would actually like affect you from a physical performance standpoint. So I go into the lab after a year, and it was me and I think maybe 12 other athletes who followed the high fat diet. And then another group of athletes, endurance athletes, they followed the standard, whatever, 55 to 75% ish based carbohydrate diet. So they did, muscle biopsies where you shove needles into the tissue and like a guillotine, like cut muscle out. And this was the night before they had us run for 3 hours on a treadmill. So they did that on the front and the back of the legs. They did fat biopsy, poop test, stool test, walk around with a giant jug to collect your urine for 24 hours. The night I got there, a VO2 max test, which is a run to complete exhaustion on a treadmill. And then kind of the icing on the cake was the second morning I was there, I had to run for 3 hours on a treadmill as far as I could go. And there was no music. There was no TV. This is just like staring at a white wall, wearing a mask that collects your gases. You can see how much fat and carbohydrate you're burning, needle sticking out of your arm to collect your blood work. Basically, what happened was with me and every other athlete who followed the high fat diet for 12 months, we rewrote the textbooks on human nutrition because we were burning on average 1.5 grams of fat per minute. And up until that point, it was believed that the maximum amount of fat that a human body could burn, even during exercise, was 1 gram of fat per minute. So what that shows is that if you somehow limit carbs, especially from things like added sugar and crap and processed foods and ultra processed foods, you can actually get your body to the point of adaptation where it preferentially burns more fat as a fuel, which is very interesting because I have some clients who I've coached who I'll try and get them off sugar, off carbs, off their morning scone and biscotti and their sandwich or Subway for lunch and, the glass of wine and chocolate and fries with dinner. And they have a really hard time for a lot of times up to 6 months because it can take 6 to 12 months for the body to adapt to lower carbohydrate intake. If you've grown up like most humans in westernized societies these days do on cereal and bread and grains and sweet baby food and sugar, and your body becomes just a sugar burning machine. But the problem with that is it can cause inflammation, atherosclerosis, sluggish energy levels, energy going up and down. So to have more stable energy levels, you can make a case for at least restricting carbohydrate and sugar to a certain extent. The trick is you got to do it typically for about 6 and up to 12 months to kind of reset your body's metabolism and to be able to have really stable energy stores. Because you can store maybe 2,000 calories of carbohydrate on your body, but you can store tens of thousands of calories of fat that you have access to be able to burn as a stable energy source all day long. And then kind of like the new cheat code, you've probably heard about this before, is they now have drinkable ketones where you can drink the same stuff that your body would normally make if you were burning a high amount of fat. And that's what I use now in people who I'm trying to get off of sugar. Is it really helps ease that transition. Like if you're used to having some fruity pre-workout shake or a bunch of carbs with dinner, and now you're hitting a wall during your workouts, you can take a shot of those ketones and it makes a night and day difference.
Damn. So that's super interesting. In the endurance world, there's kind of this, the people that I know, there's sort of these whispers around that conversation, and there's this dialogue of fat adapted endurance athletes. The most of that world that I've been exposed to, and you were competing at a very, very high level there. Most of the people that I've known don't do that and are running off sugar, right? They're running off the gels, the bullshit. Can you adapt to fat quicker for a short burst? When you talk about taking 6 to 12 months to really adapt to run off fat, is it possible to do it for endurance events more quickly?
Well, first of all, when I say you can do it with carbs, you can, but the problem is, like I mentioned earlier, your body gets used to these blood sugar ups and downs. It's more inflammatory. It's more acidic. It tends to ferment more in the gut. So people who do a lot of the gels and the traditional carbs for sports and for athletic fueling, they'll a lot of times go with gas, bloating, indigestion, constipation, etc. I've never seen any evidence that you can just start to eat more fat, cut out the carbs, and start just burning more fats and getting by on lower levels of blood sugar right away. It does take some time. Like there is a definite adaptation period. Now, what's interesting is not only do the use of liquid ketones help to ease that transitionary period, but now they have a newer kind of form of supplementation called biomimetics. Just as the name implies, you're trying to mimic something that occurs in nature. And it turns out that when you fast, the body churns out certain compounds, polyethyl amides, another one called OEA, increased levels of resveratrol, niacinamide, etc. And so if you supplement with those same type of compounds, you can shift your body into more of a fasting like state without necessarily fasting and speed up the transitionary process to fat burning as a preferential fuel versus carb burning. So you could look at that. You could look at ketones, and there's even alternatives now to these GLP-1 agonists that produce a little less nausea and I think result in a little bit less risk of muscle wasting than something like an injectable, Ozempic style GLP-1 agonist. So not only do liquid ketones kind of fall into that category because they stimulate, or rather they suppress the hormone ghrelin, which is the one that would normally make you hungry. But then there's also a way that you can trigger feelings of satiety or shutting down hunger, which helps with that fat adaptation process via the microbiome. So there's one company called Pendulum. They have a probiotic that's got Akkermansia, Butyricum, and I think Bifidobacterium, and they literally designed it to help to produce bacteria in the gut that produce the same GLP-1 like compounds that people are injecting. And then one fascinating one, it's this company out of New Zealand. I interviewed them recently on my podcast. They found this extract from the bitter hops, the same stuff you use to make beer. It's called amaracate, and it's so extremely bitter that they have to encapsulate it in like an oily medium. So it goes through the stomach and it hits the bitter receptors in the small intestine, and it induces the stimulation of not just GLP, but two other appetite regulating hormones, one called CCK and one called PYY. It makes you not want to eat for like 6 or 7 hours. So if you look at, let's say, what are we talking about right here, Brad? Because we're kind of getting deep into the science. We're talking about, well, whether I'm an athlete or not, how can I speed up the transition of becoming a fat burning machine and becoming less reliant on carbs? And I would say, in addition to just understanding that you do need to do a good job limiting your overall carbohydrate intake for a period of about 6 months to really, truly start to see impressive results and the ability to be able to do that for long periods of time. But you can ease that transition through the use of ketones, through the use of these biomimetic agents. One company called Mimeo, they even have like a done for you biomimetic kind of like packet. And then you can trigger GLP-1 through something like Akkermansia's probiotic. It's literally called GLP-1, or through this other one called CaloCurb, which is that Amarasate. When you put all that stuff together, you can definitely help to turn your body into a fat burning machine. But there's one important thing to understand, though, is like your body needs carbs. Even after that faster study where I followed a strict ketogenic diet, like 90% fat for 12 months, my thyroid was dysregulated. My testosterone dropped. I started having more joint pain because your joints need a certain amount of what's called glycan in them, which relies upon glucose to be able to help to stabilize the joints. So now my diet is not like that. Now what my diet looks like is I wake up and I go all day long eating minimum amount of carbohydrates. And that really helps with stable energy levels, focus during a work day. You know, you can see how like I'm walking on a treadmill right now. So I'm kind of like in low fat burning mode all day long, but it allows me to kind of allow my body to be a fat burning machine all day, right? So my smoothie might be some coconut milk or bone broth with ice and some protein powder and some stevia or monk fruit as a non-sugar based sweetener. And then I'll blend all that up to like a thick ice creamy like texture and top it with some coconut flakes, some cacao nibs, and some bee pollen, right? So it's like a superfood smoothie that's got a lot of protein, a lot of fats in it, kind of like ice cream, but not a lot of carbs. And then lunch for me today would be like a bed of roasted vegetables with a can of Wild Planet sardines that I'll eat with like a seaweed wrap, burrito style, and another cup of bone broth with some vegetable powders, right? So again, pretty low carb, but pretty nutrient dense. And then dinner is when I kind of open the floodgates and eat as many carbs as I want. And when I say eat as many carbs as I want, it's not a ton. Like it still comes out to me eating no more than 30% of my total daily intake from carbs. But it comes out to maybe, if you want to do the math, like 200 to 300 grams of carbs, sweet potatoes, yam, little white rice, maybe some dark chocolate and blueberries stirred into yogurt, a glass of red wine, etc. So with that strategy, it's kind of cool because carbohydrates help your body to make serotonin, which is the precursor to melatonin. So if you save all your carbohydrates for night, you're keeping your body in a fat burning state all day long, but then you're putting carbs into your body in the evening, and that helps you to sleep better. And it also helps to restore some of your muscle and your liver glycogen. So you would have, let's say, a really great workout the next morning without building up long-term carbohydrate depletion. And that scenario works really well in somebody like me who likes to work out every day. If somebody's less active, they could go lower carb most of the week and then just have a refeed meal on like a Saturday night and a Sunday night. So it kind of depends on your level of activity. And then, you know, some people might push back on this and say, well, I heard that the body is more insulin sensitive in the morning. And so the morning is when you should have carbs, and then you should not have a lot of carbs in the evening. And while that is true, the thing is that you can actually make your body more kind of bulletproof and resistant against the blood sugar spiking effects of carbs through specific things that you can do before dinner. And so you can induce a state of almost like your own induced insulin sensitivity before dinner. An example of that would be a cold shower, a 10-minute walk, anything that's like bitter or herbaceous, like a shot of apple cider vinegar, or a supplement like Bear Brain or bitter melon extract. And so I'll do that a lot of times before dinner. Like, you know, I'll finish up the workday. We usually have dinner at about 7. I'll jump in the cold plunge at maybe 6:30. I'll make myself a little, you know, sparkling water with some electrolytes and some apple cider vinegar, all of that before dinner. And so by the time dinner rolls around, it's not like I'm insulin insensitive because it's evening. So just a little bit of physical activity, some herbs, spices, bitters, anything like that, and you can induce your own state of insulin sensitivity. So it kind of allows you to, you know, have your cake and eat it too.
Okay. Those are 1,000 interesting tricks to get fat adapted. You also brought up, I think, from the beginning, this is all relatively new to you. Like this is the last 10 years or so that you went down this path. But when you were doing endurance in the first place, you were not in this mode, right? You learned this starting with this study.
No, dude, I grew up on like take and bake pizza and 29-cent hamburger. What was it, Wednesday? 39-cent cheeseburger Thursday. Like freaking, a total westernized diet. And also in college, even though it kind of changed a little bit to where like I started buying the whole grain bread instead of the white bread and started having the brown scone at the coffee shop instead of the whiter scone with the frosting on it. Right. And so I started thinking a little bit about that kind of stuff. I ate a pretty stereotypically high carbohydrate diet for a large portion of my life, which is kind of back to what I was talking about. Like if you've trained your body to feed on sugar for 20 years, it's not like you can switch to sugar restriction for a week and expect all those cravings to go away and your body to shift to using fat as a fuel preferentially right away. That's why it takes a few months.
One of the things that I was curious about, and you kind of answered this already for me, was there's a lot of the people that are really intense athletes are not really excited about spending 30 hours deep diving into a topic to learn the details around it. They sort of lean on a coach or somebody else to tell them what to do and what the regimen is supposed to be. But you also said that through college, you ended up getting your master's in this. So clearly you had a very high level of interest in diving into the nutrition and biomechanics behind all of this. One of the things that I don't know is why you were doing all of this competition and how you thought you were going to make money in the first place when you were in college. And this will be kind of a segue into business.
All right. Segue into business. And then, by the way, just real quick, you did bring up something interesting. You said somebody's going to do something intense. Understand that if you're into like CrossFit and highly so-called glycolytic activities and a ton of weight training and high intensity interval training, even though you need to be careful with excess amounts of that, in the same way you need to be careful with excess amounts of aerobic exercise, if you're on the pointy edge of those sports, sometimes you need to take that carb loading approach I just described and still even have a little bit of carbohydrates before a super intense morning workout, like, a handful of blueberries or, half a sweet potato with some honey on it or something like that. So it does kind of depend, because I know you probably have a few more extreme folks who listen in, Brad, who might have a really, really high carb throughput. So there is some amount of dependency, and it's the job of guys like me as a coach to sit down and look at stuff like that and advise accordingly. But on the business side of things, I was just basically a race car, man. So what happened was in college, I really wanted to go to medical school. So I took the MCATs and all the pre-meds. I got accepted to 6 different medical schools, and there were 2 MD PhD programs, Duke and UPenn, that I didn't get into that I really wanted to go to. So I decided to work in the private sector for a year to make myself more palatable to a couple of these other institutions. So I wound up getting a job straight out of college with my master's working for Biomet in hip and knee surgical sales. I absolutely detested that job. I developed a real distaste for modern medicine, standing there with a laser pointer helping surgeons to install overpriced, $20,000 to $40,000 hip and knee implants into obese and overweight patients who would have been better served through preventive medicine. All the doctors seemed to hate their jobs. I didn't know a lot about like functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, the more natural side of medicine, which, that's the nature of a lot of the doctors that I interview now, and a lot of the type of medical advice, if you want to call it that you might find in my books. But at the time, my plans for sports medicine or orthopedic surgery were pretty dampened by that experience. So I quit that job after less than a year, after like 9 months. And I walked into the gym that was across the street from the apartment I was living at in Liberty Lake, Washington. And I slapped my resume on the counter and asked for a job. At that point, not only did I have a master's degree, I'd managed the University of Idaho Wellness Center, personal trained, and done nutrition coaching all through college. I was already beginning to race in triathlons and kind of had a name for myself as kind of a fitness guru in the local community. So I got the job right away managing that gym, the Liberty Lake Athletic Club, and absolutely transformed their training program. I introduced group training classes, triathlon training classes, recurring revenue based models for personal training where you're not paying for a series of, say, like sessions that you're just allowed to use over a certain period of time, like 10 sessions you use over however long you want to use them. You know, you got 10 sessions for Christmas and you might spread them out over a year. Instead, anybody who signed up for personal training, they signed up for a monthly recurring revenue program in which whether or not they came to their training session or not, they were being charged because everything was wrapped up. Nutrition, their emails, their phone contact with their coach, their session if they wanted to show up for it. But if not, their session was already written out for them to do themselves, et cetera. So I used a real different approach to the way I had that set up. And about 2 years into that, I was doing really well as a personal trainer. And one of my clients' husbands approached me, and he was a local sports medicine physician. His name was Dr. P.Z. Pierce. He was also the physician for Ironman triathlon. And so he kind of knew of me because I'd started to race Ironmans at that point. And he proposed to me this idea of opening a one-stop shop for sports medicine. Chiropractors, physical therapists, massage therapists, sports medicine docs. I would be the director of sports performance. And so we literally opened this massive warehouse across the street from Gonzaga. I kind of implemented a lot of the same type of billing and group training and subscription-based training models that I had been running at the gym. But we also invested in a lot of really cool equipment, like, you know, high-speed video cameras for gait analysis and bike fits, and blood draw equipment for nutrition programming or, you know, injections of anti-inflammatory compounds. We had calorimetry that you could wear on your face to measure your fat and your carbohydrate burning at rest and during exercise. And so I pretty quickly made a name for myself in the community as the guy who you would go to when nothing else was working or when you just wanted the best of the best, right? Like money wasn't a factor. You just wanted to totally optimize your body and your brain. And that was kind of like my early days of biohacking because I'm using all this equipment that a lot of other trainers weren't using. And we also, by the nature of us having medical staff in our facility, developed a relationship with a lot of the local physicians in the community. And so I used a lot of the resources from the American Academy for Sports Medicine's Exercise is Medicine initiatives. And we had a lot of physicians sending their patients to us for rehab and for exercise and for medical management. So we kind of had like these super duper high end athletes and executives and entrepreneurs, and then also a really good referral system based from the local medical community. Several of these doctors in 2008 nominated me for the Personal Trainer of the Year award. And so long story short is I won as America's top personal trainer. I went to Vegas and got my trophy and my award. And then I wound up on the cover of all these fitness magazines. You know, I had just started a podcast. I had a website where I was sending out newsletters and writing articles, and kind of got
let me pause you on that.
limelight.
Let me pause you on that because, well, this is the chapter that people that you have this huge brand for now. But what's curious to me is sort of, you know, you had it sounds like a very distinct path that you were going down, which is medicine. I wanted to be a doctor, and you had this goal in front of you, and there were other things along the way with training, but from a schooling perspective and a career perspective, that was the path, right? Everything leads up to, I'm going to be a doctor. And then you had a pretty hard shift. Through that period, did you have a goal in front of you?
I was honestly more interested in going around the world and racing, because at that point, like I mentioned, I was a race car. I had a bunch of sponsors paying my airline miles and hotel fees and writing me checks to go wear their logo and race in triathlons. And I was doing really well. And I was doing like travel writing and writing for different fitness and triathlon magazines. And so I was almost like this sponsored freelance racer who also had a side gig that was pretty good as one of the top personal trainers in town. And I was honestly pretty happy with that whole scenario until my wife got pregnant. And I found out she was pregnant with twin sons. And dude, I would like wake up at 4 a.m., ride my bike 10 miles to one office, work all day coaching and training clients, do my own training sessions, ride home, get home at like 8, have dinner with my wife, go into the office, write my newsletters, my articles, work on my website programming, record a podcast, go to bed at like midnight, and get up and do it again. Right. So I'm sleeping like 4 to 6 hours max, working my tail off, loving my job. But I also knew that if I was going to be a present at home or available father and husband, that something needed to change as far as the way that my career was set up. I was at one conference where I was literally teaching how to make money in the brick and mortar personal training studio space. And this guy got up and gave a big talk about VSLs. I had no clue what a VSL was, but he gave out his script for his video sales letter. He talked about JVs, which I thought was like when you suck too much to play for the varsity basketball team. I later learned about affiliate ventures and joint ventures and ClickBank and information products and VSLs and copywriting. And this whole new world kind of opened up to me. And this was right when my wife was like 8 months out from having our first children, our twin boys. So this was, they're 16 now. So it's 16 years ago. So I spent like 6 months developing my avatar, my problem, my cause, my copywriting scenario. I wrote out an entire triathlon training program designed for the busy, hard-charging executive or entrepreneur who wants to cross the finish line with a smile on their face, but still wants time left over for social life and family and friends and career and hobbies to be able to complete their goal of doing an Ironman triathlon using science-backed training tactics that allow you to be able to achieve that goal with the minimum effective dose of exercise while becoming healthier and fitter and stronger in the process. Developed a relationship with disc.com in Texas to do physical fulfillment of a $197 package of books and DVDs and training programs and nutrition and diet plans. I had the same thing available as a digital download, had it on ClickBank, hired my first VA after reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week and had her do a bunch of research on all the top triathlon clubs and triathlon clinics in the US. Made personal phone calls and emails and got them all signed up as affiliates for the program and launched what was called the Triathlon Dominator during Ironman Triathlon Race Week in Hawaii. And I was racing also, right? But I knew there'd be a lot of traffic to triathlon websites and buzz around triathlon and people looking for Ironman triathlon training programs like I had been, years before when I'd been standing in Coeur d'Alene watching these Ironman triathletes cross the finish line, and I kind of wanted a way to do it myself. I was racing, but I literally launched on race day, and I had all my tweets pre-scheduled, like coming out of the water right now, a big smile on my face. I use the Triathlon Dominator training plan, or I'm halfway through the bike, feel great, and I'm right on track to finish this race using the Triathlon Dominator training program. And of course, shit could have hit the fan. Anything could have gone wrong and that would have backfired. But the race went exactly according to plan. All my pre-scheduled tweets, my marketing, everything. The program went live.
And this is 2008.
Yeah, the program went live when I crossed the finish line. I did about $50,000 in sales over around 5 days, which for me at the time, a little less than half of what I was making annually as a personal trainer. But for being able to do it in a week in my underwear from my home office, or at least do that amount of sales in a week and understand that I could do copywriting and information product creation and a lot of this stuff that I learned over the past 6 months while still being at home with my sons and my wife, that was a real light bulb moment for me. So I wound up over the next few months selling out all of my personal training studios, gyms, equipment, moving into a home office, focusing more on the podcast, focusing more on writing. I did an information product for marathoning, for swimming, for knee pain, for back pain. Then I started to write books, continued to freelance for magazines. Eventually, I launched a supplements company because I had so many relationships with all these different folks who I'd worked with as sponsors in the Ironman triathlon industry. So I launched pretty much out of my garage a company called Greenfield Fitness Systems, which involved kind of a combination of drop shipping and warehousing. And that eventually became Keon, which is now a very successful supplements company that, we rebranded and that operates out of Boulder. And so, that was kind of the slow rolling snowball that brought me to where I am now. I podcast, I coach and work with people from all over the world via phone calls and online coaching. I write books. I do a lot of investing in the health and fitness space, investing, advising, use of likeness type of stuff. Still do a lot of work with affiliates and partners. launching a new membership-based website for health advice starting in September. And so, yeah, that's kind of how all that gradually happened.
So basically, the introduction to Tim Ferriss, information products, ClickBank, which is a way to sell information products through affiliates, led to the realization of self-sufficiency through that.
Yeah, realizing that trading time for dollars can definitely pay the bills, but that because really at my heart, I love to learn, but I don't just love to learn for learning's sake. I love to learn and then turn around and teach people with whatever I've learned, that I could get paid to do that from the comfort of my own home and still be able to be with my family, which along with God is the most important thing in my life. Like, it's kind of a lifestyle reinvention. And so, it's fantastic. I'm recording this podcast with you in the basement of my home office. We'll finish the podcast and I'll go up and see my son, who's probably sitting up in the breakfast nook, in an online math class or working on his card game business or whatever, and give him a hug and hang out and say, how's your day going? And, move along. And so it's just kind of cool. I love being able to work from home, but also be a stay-at-home father and husband.
Yeah, it's awesome. In the transitional path, one of the things you said is you've written a bunch of books and a couple very well known, and you've got a few different topics that are interesting, from nutrition to training to spirituality to cooking and relationships and all sorts of stuff. Where do the books fit into the business model? Is it just scratching your own itch, or are you using the books to drive something else?
Yeah, well, books are a calling card. Books don't pay the bills. I get a royalty check for my books, but there's, is nothing significant. I think probably the primary benefit of a book that you're able to leverage a publisher and branding agency with to get good space on shelves, or whether you're able to self-publish, using modern self-publishing tactics to get really good distribution. It's basically a way to get onto bigger and better stages and get paid more to speak. And then also, as long as you have really good funnels and lead generation tactics built into your website to be able to build your list and drive traffic to a low ticket, mid ticket, high ticket item, or all three. And so, yeah, your book is just basically one giant calling card with maybe a little bit of that, like you mentioned, Brad, scratch my own itch because I do love to write books type of thing.
And for you, the monetization, Keon is part of that. Are there other monetization mechanisms? You mentioned low, mid, high.
Keon doesn't make much or get much traffic from my books. That's purely e-commerce and PPC. It's just,
nice.
Our own last click acquisition software, almost no retail, no wholesale. It's like Keon products I talk about in my book, but it's, it's not a really huge part of the book. The main thing for me in terms of the funnels that I drive my book to are coaching. Speaking, there's not necessarily a speaking funnel in there, but just the mere fact that if anybody in EO or YP or whatever happens to grab your book and read it, like the fact that you have a book out there, the amount of organic speaking opportunities that come through from people who have read my book, even though there's not a precise funnel built around that, that also is pretty significant. And then once I launch this membership website in the fall, that will also be a major call to action, both like on the last slide of any presentations I give from stage, as well as within the pages of the book. So I think probably the main thing, though, is if you have a newsletter or a coaching program relevant to the content of your book, that's where I focus a lot of the traffic from the book is my email newsletter and my coaching. The speaking happens organically. And then, besides that, I would say the only other thing is something like a cookbook. There's also a lot of kind of partner-based income involved with that, because everything from kitchen tools to ingredients to, to meat sources, et cetera, a lot of those are based on partnerships. And writing a cookbook is kind of cool because, any tool, ingredient, product, meat or fish service, et cetera, that you mentioned in there, they're pretty incentivized to promote your cookbook also. So it's really great for things like bulk buying and partnership revenue.
The membership side of things, you mentioned coaching and you mentioned launching a membership right now. How much of that goes to you personally spending your time coaching versus a group coaching versus any other model?
Yeah, great question. I coach 10 people maximum per month. Those people pay $5K a month for me to be kind of like the CEO of their health. Right. So right now I'm coaching 7 people. And that means that they've got unlimited access to asynchronous communication with me via an app called Voxer, which is like a walkie-talkie. So they can just ask me questions whenever they want. Every Saturday, I sit down, I look at their ring or wearable data and program out what the next week of workouts is going to look like based on where they're traveling, what they have access to, how they're feeling, if they're injured, etc. And then I also do a la carte coaching calls. So like, in about 15 minutes here, I'll launch into 3 separate calls, a 20-minute, a 30-minute, and a 60-minute consult with people who just hire me a la carte to talk about their health needs. So I spend about a solid 30% of my time coaching. And then I also have a couple of dozen other people who have gone through my coaching programs who are certified and who we also direct clients to, just with a very simple rev split agreement. And then I spend typically another 6 to 8 hours per week doing video content for my website and also for other partners who are paying for things like whitelisting or use of likeness. I spend another around 6 to 8 hours per week on podcast prep and podcast recording, which is primarily based on affiliate and partnership revenue. And then typically I spend about an hour a day writing, editing articles, book chapters, etc. Those would be the primary ways that I really spend my time right now. Besides, a lot of times in the afternoons between about 4:30 and 6 p.m., I reserve that for things like advisory calls with companies who I'm working with, investments, due diligence, etc. A lot more of what I guess you would call the reactive versus the creative work.
Yeah, that's super helpful, man, because I think a lot of people, especially today when entrepreneurs are sort of pushed to this space of personal branding and content creation, how much time is being spent by somebody like yourself that is really deep in the weeds, that is really thorough in their expertise, is completely disproportionate relative to what most people spend on creation. But it seems like you enjoy it too.
Yeah. I probably work about, average around 55, 60 hours a week. And a lot of it's just a ton of fun. I'm getting to shoot the shit with guys like you and research cool health concepts and talk on podcasts. And I love to write and love to help build companies and grow companies. So yeah, it's fun.
So part of biohacking is it's not common, right? It's new stuff that's different, figuring out what works. What do you think the strangest thing is that you're doing right now physically?
All right. I got to go in a couple of minutes, so I'll give you the basic overview. So if you would have asked me this like a month ago, I would have said paying a hell of a lot of attention to the health of my big toe mobility, toe spacer devices, little proprioceptive balls to work on the bottom of the foot, barefoot shoes like Paluvas or Vivo Barefoots, because I realize through myself and a lot of my clients that mobility, strength, and flexibility of the big toe affects the rest of the body in really surprising ways. And then I got my toes and the bottom of my feet really strong and supple and flexible, and just the amount of comfort I feel when walking and the strength and the suppleness of my feet is incredible. So now I've moved on, and now I'm pretty hardcore focused on tongue, teeth, and jaw biomechanics. There's a book, the last book I read is called Jaws, The Story of a Hidden Epidemic. It's about how we breathe, how we carry our head and neck posture, the type of dental work that you can have done to reshape the mouth and the biomechanics of the teeth and the jaw to assist with not just reduction of disease-causing bacteria in the mouth, but also the ability to be able to chew and masticate properly. Specific tongue exercises that you do to allow for better mobility of the tongue, better salivary enzyme production, and also, and this is important for a lot of people, complete elimination of sleep apnea or obstructive sleep apnea or issues that occur with poor oxygenation during sleep. So if you wanted to look into this, I would say look up the field of bioaesthetic dentistry. Check out that book, Jaws, The Story of a Hidden Epidemic. Look up on YouTube, for example, the concept of mewing, MEWING. There's even entire YouTube channels like Jaw Hacks devoted to this. And so my teeth, my mouth, my jaw, that's like the number one thing that I'm working on now. And the most surprising thing, Brad, is I'm now chewing all of my food to complete liquid goo, like 25 to 40
Whoa.
times. I've retrained my mouth properly to do so. My tongue is suctioned up against the roof of my mouth when I'm working out, so I'm able to breathe through my nose the whole time. And just how I feel after a meal, as far as absence of bloating, really good digestion, even great poops in the morning, everything has really been surprisingly impacted by attention paid to teeth, mouth, and jaw. So I'm planning on doing a few podcasts on it over the next few months. But yeah, I would say like two neglected areas people don't think enough about are their mouth and their big toes. So those would be two things to look into from almost like a biohacking standpoint.
So from an ingestion perspective, we have a client that drinks urine. Should you drink urine?
I have before. There's even whole books about like Your Own Perfect Medicine, I think is the name of the book, about some of the antibodies and beneficial compounds and stem cell precursors and stuff like that in urine. But I interviewed a guy who was super into it, and I even tried it for a week. Like not a lot, just like a few dropperfuls every morning. I didn't notice anything, and it was yet another thing to do that simultaneously seemed a little gross. So I didn't stick with it. But I think that you could make a case that there could be some immune modulating properties of urine that would dictate that microdosing with your own urine with a very small dropperful amount of first morning void could have benefits, but it's not something that stuck with me.
All right. Last question. Brian Johnson is convinced that he's going to live forever. Yes or no?
Well, look, you're asking a Christian. I think everybody's going to live forever for better or worse. So it kind of depends. If you're talking about this mortal body, no. If you're talking about the immortal soul, sure. I think everybody goes on to live for eternity. And I think that honestly, the most important thing to consider here is your health span versus your lifespan, right? Like I want to be really healthy up until I'm like 90 years old, playing football with my grandkids or great grandkids in the backyard, feeling great, having sex, climbing mountains, and then just drop dead as close to that point in death as possible, right? Because you don't want to live a long time if you're debilitated for the period of time between 110 and 160 with all your friends dead and you're sitting lonely in a hyperbaric chamber. You also don't want to like spend years of your life cold and hungry and libidoless, chasing after longevity and spending all the extra hours that you're giving living chasing after longevity. So I try to strike a balance. I think that at this point, based on where science stands and the maximum human lifespan on record and our access to stem cells, gene therapy, lower, electrical and light and air pollution, if we really have our environment set up properly, I think that some of these cats like Brian Johnson, Dave Asprey, Peter Diamandis, et cetera, they could probably make it to around 120.
Interesting. Well, I'll be curious to see, or maybe I won't see.
We'll find out.
Maybe that's beyond my years.
Yeah. Me, I don't care because I'm going to live forever with Jesus anyways. Hallelujah.
Ben Greenfield, I appreciate the time, man. Where do you want to point people?
Just my website, bengreenfieldlife.com. You could find out most of what I'm up to there. Like I mentioned, I got that book launched in January, Boundless, the upgraded so-called Bible of biohacking. And then I've got the Life Network, the new health membership website launching in around September. And that'll be at golifenetwork.com. So there's all your goodies.
Dig it. Well, it is almost August of 2024. So keep that in mind when you're listening. Always good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, Brad. That was fun.